we are definitely conditioned to take care of the patients first, which there is a place for that. But yes, forget about ourselves. So just my personal story, coming out of a background of exercise physiology, I was a competitive athlete. When I started med school, I think we all have this competitive nature and we're watching other people, we're like, oh, they're not sleeping or they are eating while they're studying. So we pick up those habits and it gets even worse, unfortunately, during residency. As a med student, I don't know if you were told, given that advice, put a granola bar in your pocket, go with the flow. So you
Yeah.
just sneak when the attending is gone or writing charts and has this
Mhm.
back to you, you stuff
Mhm.
whatever you can in your mouth and keep going.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. You know who I am. I am Dr. Maisha Claiborne, founder of the Mind Remapping Company. And I am so excited today. We are having a conversation now. Those who have followed me and those who know me know that I got my beginnings in my first career transition in burnout. And I have multiple career transitions, but I love this topic. I continue to love this topic of burnout. And today we're going to be talking about the role of making sure we take care of our physical needs, our food, our sleep, and our exercise. And I am so excited because I have this sister doc, Dr. Anita Lwanga of Lwanga MD with me. She is a colleague, she is a fast growing friend. She just taught me something on the back end just now. She is like a fellow entrepreneur, and we are in a community together that amplifies and helps us to grow. So I am so excited to have her here to talk about this because it is such an important conversation. And all that I'm seeing these days with the different climates, the global climate, the environmental climate, the political climate, just the way corporate is and medicine is in general, there's so much burnout and there's so much conditioning that leads to that as well. So this is going to be a juicy conversation. Y'all stay tuned and welcome, Dr. Luanga. How are you?
I am doing good. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Maisha. This has been a conversation we've been waiting to have for a long time. So I'm very
Yes.
excited to finally have a chance to talk with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I love for my audience to get to know my guests. And so, if you would just share a little bit about you, about your business, and how you came to do what you're doing now.
Okay, so as you mentioned, my name's Anita Lwanga. I'm an exercise physiologist. The reason I say that is because my first degree was in exercise and health physiology before I went into med school. I'm a
Mhm.
general internist by training and also a geriatrician. So it's been a very interesting journey, but I do use what I learned in my undergraduate degree every day as I talk to my patients. I think we all know that Western medicine is spectacular. We have made so many advances in terms of what we can do to help people, but oftentimes when I talk to my patients, the foundational things are missing. People do their best, they're busy, they are eating whenever they can, whatever they can eat, but a few small tweaks can make big differences in their health, not only just their general well being, but even in controlling diabetes, controlling high blood pressure, and even
Mhm.
controlling their mental status or their well-being. For example, if
Mhm.
they exercise, when we exercise we release endorphins, so I find I help my patients with reminding them about the basics of exercising, diet. I'm going to talk about more specifics later on as we get into our conversation.
Mhm.
Well, in terms of what I do right now, I'm a general internist. I practice at the Saskatchewan Health Authority, which is in Western Canada. Prior to that, I was working in upstate New York. And prior to that, I lived in Illinois. I did my internal medicine and geriatrics training in Illinois. So my heart is, I'm a Canadian, but my heart is also in the US. So I'm not a US citizen, but I'm like on both sides of the border at the same.
Yeah, I think it's you know what I it's funny because for some reason I don't think I remembered that you're in Canada, but what occurs for me now is that we need this type of work in all of our environments in Canada, in the US, in UK. I'm hearing burnout is a thing. I think sometimes, especially our audiences that listen stateside, kind of think, well, this is a US phenomenon, but it isn't only a US phenomenon. And so I appreciate that you have your foot in both sides of the border, right? Like you have had your, and that you help people who are like dealing with this in Canada. And so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of tweaking our daily regimens and how that impacts like our energy and our ability to sustain ourselves as leaders. in our fields. Talk a little bit about that. We got a whole bunch to talk about. We got food, we got sleep, we got exercise. So why don't we start with, I want to start with food because I remember in residency, and I don't know if you remember this. I don't know how long ago it's been, but there was a saying, eat when you can,
Hmm.
sleep when you can, pee when you can. So two of those are right in here. So we were already in medicine. I don't know, like adjacent career, adjacent industries, if they have similar sayings, maybe they sound a little different, but we're conditioned to ignore our own bodily needs, our own needs for the sake of service or for the sake of work or for the sake of production or productivity. So let's talk a little bit about, let's start with food.
Oh, you are so right. We are definitely conditioned to take care of the patients first, which there is a place for that. But yes, forget about ourselves. So, just my personal story coming out of a background of exercise physiology, I was a competitive athlete. When I started med school, I think we all have this competitive nature, and we're watching other people, we're like, oh, they're not sleeping or they are eating while they're studying. So we pick up those habits and it gets even worse, unfortunately, during residency. As a med student, I don't know if you were told, given that advice, put a granola bar in your pocket, go with the flow. So you
Yeah.
just sneak when the attending is gone or writing charts and he has this
Mhm,
back to you, you stuff
mhm,
whatever you can in your mouth and keep going. So
mhm.
my personal story, I had all those bad habits and I managed to maintain my weight primarily because I probably was not eating enough to sustain myself. And
Mhm.
residency was even worse. Even
Right.
although I had to give my residency program credit, they gave us some kind of meal card. They're like, we don't want these residents fainting on us, so we'll give them a little bonus to at least
Right.
feed themselves. And then when I became an attending, for those of you who are not in medicine, an attending is a doctor that works independently on their own. They've done their training. So I was like, I need to be healthier. I'm telling my patients, you need to eat vegetables, you need to exercise. And sleep more. And I was doing a night shift job. That's another story. You need to sleep more. So I'm like, I'm gonna make some changes. I made changes I thought were healthy, and my weight ballooned. And it was very
Mhm.
confusing for me. Yeah, it was very confusing
Mhm.
for me because I'm like, how can I have a chocolate bar for breakfast and drink tea latte for dinner? And now I'm eating like 3 square meals and I'm exercising. I was not exercising during residency and my weight is going up. So it's because of the habits I learned. So it's
Right.
not that you were not supposed to eat. We should eat nutritious foods and our body will stabilize itself. It's the kind
Mhm.
of food we're selecting and it's when we're eating. So for me, I ended up getting a nutrition coach, and he taught me the things I know, but in a non-theoretical way, like in a very practical way. One of the
Mhm.
things that made a biggest change, which I still sometimes struggle to implement, is eating more frequently.
Yes.
So yes, as a physician, for those of us who are physicians, we have, especially if you're working in the hospital, you have long days, and a lot of us are in the habit of, I got to work, I had my coffee, let me hurry up and see the patients as quickly as I can, do the notes, try to get my work done. While I'm writing notes, maybe I'll get some food in my stomach. It's
Mhm.
a very common thing, but you need to make sure you have a good solid big breakfast in the morning. We
Mhm.
were conditioned, you don't eat a lot of breakfast, you're not falling
Right.
asleep, but it's because of the foods we chose.
Right.
So I found that for me, he suggested I have a higher protein meal, but my biggest meal in the morning, have a
Mhm.
snack before, in between breakfast and lunch, have lunch. He's take a break, and
Yes.
it's not going to end. Take a break, you'll have more energy,
That's
and then
right.
have another snack in between lunch and dinner. And by the time dinner comes around, you have a smaller meal. So I noticed the first week I was actually able to implement that. My energy levels were incredible. I thought I was going to be sleepy after eating a
Mhm.
big breakfast that was high in protein, high in vegetables. I
Mhm.
was not sleepy. And then
Mhm.
I would force myself. I actually had to have an alarm on my phone to leave the floor and just go in another place. I'd have my little like protein water with me, have
Yeah.
that. And I was like, whoa, I have so much energy. So just having the discipline and knowing that it is okay to take a break, it is
Mhm.
okay to eat properly and take care of myself makes
Mhm.
me a better person, first of all.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have energy. It makes me a better doctor. I'm able to think clearer and I have more energy. It's the discipline of doing that and undoing what we were taught that we're not supposed to take care of ourselves that is counterintuitive. But when you're able to implement it, you'll do your work faster, you'll have more energy, and you feel more authentic because you're practicing what you preach.
Yeah, I think that this whole idea of skipping meals is a universal thing. I'm only going to speak for the United States because that's where I live, but I think that's like it's an American thing that I've heard over and over, especially in corporate life, is skipping that breakfast. Like I don't eat, I just have my coffee and then I go, and then there's lunch. One of the things I'll piggyback is that not only do we need to have that high protein breakfast because it gives us energy, but it also kicks up our immune system. Our what is
The metabolism.
Metabolism, thank you.
Yeah.
It kicks up our metabolism. It kicks up our metabolism. And so it kicks off our metabolism, right? And
Mhm.
so even if now I love breakfast. It is my favorite meal. I cannot skip breakfast. However, during the weekdays, I practice yoga in the mornings. And so I actually don't eat breakfast in the same way. My biggest meal is lunch, Monday through
Mm.
Thursday, and then Friday through Sunday, breakfast. And I'm more of a brunch person than anything else. So I tend to have my breakfast a little bit later, but always the first meal is breakfast. And so one of the things that I do though is I make sure I get some kind of protein in my body in the morning. And I really love that you emphasize that the protein because that protein stabilizes the blood sugar, right? And I think that's where when we used to get tired if we're eating a bagel in the morning or we're eating a piece of toast in the morning or we're eating a granola bar and it's like high carb and no protein, the stuff runs out, just runs out. And I love what you said, just amplifying, like loving what you said about taking a break. Like even if it's I used to tell my clients, my physician clients, even if it's 20 minutes, like it's amazing what 20 minutes can do. But sit and like mindfully eat. So I love that you amplified that. That's just, yeah, that's brilliant.
Even for me, 20 minutes is amazing. To be honest, my breaks are like 5 minutes. But just that 5 minutes, yeah, to have a snack. I'll
Yeah,
just walk off, go into the hallway, have my little snack, and just be away. 20 minutes is amazing if you can do it. But even 5, 10 minutes,
yeah.
just to start with, just a
Mhm.
small step will
Just a
make a
small
difference.
step. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that there's because when you're a hospitalist, right? So
I
you
do a little bit of both. So the
both.
system where we
When
do
you're
inpatient and out.
right, so when you're on your inpatient, when you're on, I know this specifically hospitalists and then shift workers like ER docs and there's no like stated lunch. Like there's no and anyone who's not inside of medicine that does shift work also knows this because I know there's shift workers that are outside of medicine. There's no stated lunch. It's like you work the shift, you may have some breaks, but you don't have the hour lunch that people who are like at a desk or in clinical or like in the clinic have to like between patients. And oftentimes, even those people who like have those stated lunch will work through those lunch. Our family docs will be like, "Well, I got to catch on notes, catch my notes 5 minutes." So I think that there's a little bit of privilege inside of those who don't do shift work to be able to take that 15 minutes because when you're on the floor and you're moving, your page is going off and you got to answer every second. It's hard to even take that 5 minutes. You're just trying to get through the day. So I appreciate that perspective. Yeah. So now, anything more about food? You talk about like how we eat and like in terms of the making sure you're eating the amount of meals that you need to eat for you. I do think that for some people who are grazers, as long as they're grazing the right foods and they're getting enough calories in their body, then it works just as well as those who eat like meals, separate meals, 3 versus 5 versus I think it's like you said, I think it's quality that matters. Anything else about food that our people should know?
Yes, absolutely. So even just going back to what my nutrition coach taught me and just my journey with, say, gaining weight and then like stabilizing, I was actually eating less. And the reason I talk about my story is because it's like really, I think for me, I was just really puzzled as to
Mhm,
how having some guidance can really
mhm.
make a big difference, just small tweaks. So I was
Yeah.
eating less food, but eating the wrong foods. I put
Mhm,
on weight. I actually eat more food when I follow my coach. I ate more food and my weight went down. So it
yeah.
was the types of food. So I don't calorie count based on his program.
Mhm,
Basically, he gives very simple guidelines that are sustainable. Choose more vegetables. So I don't really
mhm,
count or apportion the size of
mhm,
vegetables I'm going to take. Choose
mhm,
more protein. I think it's like a palm and a half if it's like a serving of meat, or
mhm,
rely more on like egg whites with like maybe one egg yolk. Make sure you
mhm,
have fat with every meal, but
mhm,
focusing more on vegetables, on things in their natural form. We really focus in on that, avoiding the sauces, avoiding processed foods, reducing your salt. Your weight will normalize without really having to work too hard.
mhm,
So I think somebody had a statement. This is not my statement, but it's a statement I love. They said select foods that fly, that walk, that swim, and that grow that way. So when you walk into the store, it's usually the stuff in the back and the peripheries that is like the fruits, the vegetables, the stuff in its natural form. The stuff
Mhm.
that's going to catch you right away is going to be the cookies, everything that's processed. If you can just minimize that within
Mhm.
reason, but try to focus in on natural foods, that is the best for your body. And that I think that's the best piece of advice I can give you. That's very simple and sustainable.
I love that swim, that fly, that walk, and that grow that way. And
Mhm.
for some of us, it's just swim and grow that way, and some of us, it's just grow that way, depending on depending on who you are, like, and what you like. But that's so simple to remember, though.
Mhm.
Swim, walk, fly, grow that way.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is
yeah. And
so
maybe,
simple.
yeah, if you're vegan, you can still get your protein. Select more lentils,
Absolutely.
more beans, more nuts.
That's right.
Maybe not the bread, okay, but it didn't grow that
It
way.
didn't grow that way.
You substitute in there.
It still applies. If you're
Mhm.
vegan, it's just that grow that way. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the most interesting vegan meal I've heard of is beer and French fries. It's vegan, but it's not that healthy.
Didn't grow that way.
No, no, it's not really that good for you, even though it's vegan.
I used to date this guy who was a vegetarian, but he really was a pastatarian. That man could eat some pasta. I'd be like, "Do you eat vegetables?" "No, I just eat pasta." I'm like, "What kind of what's the veg in vegetarian?"
Yeah, touche, yeah. This
Yes. Well, I appreciate that. I think if people are gonna walk away with anything from the food pieces, that fly, walk, swim, or grow that way, and taking time to take breaks. Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. All right, well, look, you're exercise physiologist. Let's talk about exercise. I love talking about exercise because there's so many myths around exercise and work.
absolutely, absolutely. Where do I begin?
What's the biggest myth or resistance or objection that you get around exercise, especially from people with like really busy schedules? Because we're talking about like beyond this burnout piece. And most of the time, it's the busyness, this the busy excuse. So I'd love to hear what are your biggest objections around it?
Absolutely. I think, yes, we're all very busy. I think the biggest objection definitely is people being busy. Think about my patient population. Joint
Mhm.
pain is a big one. If you have joint pain, it's a little bit difficult to exercise.
Mhm.
So maybe I'll tackle it first with the busyness. So you can multitask. You can get your workout in a decent workout that's very healthy, that is not expensive, and you can multitask. I think the best advice I tell people is walk. That is, just walk for 1 hour. You can put in your audiobook or any
Mhm.
kind of podcast. If you're a spiritual person, you can do prayer walk. That's what my trainer does, and that's what he
Oh, yeah.
suggested. I'm trying to think of other ways you can use your time. Oh, if you like Netflix, get your Netflix on. If
Yeah.
you're on a treadmill, walk. You'll be amazed how many places you can fit a walk in if you add another activity onto it. So you choose whatever you want to do, whether it's a prayer walk, whether it's like watching Netflix, just do that walk. And I'd suggest, if you're, depending on what your goals are, if you're trying to cut back, burn fat on your body, obviously, if you're on a weight loss journey, you want to maintain your muscle mass. You don't
Mhm.
want to lose muscle, you want to lose fat. The type of exercise my coach suggested, which also blew my mind, was fasted cardio, meaning he suggested that I walk in the morning for about 1 hour,
Huh.
about three, yeah, starting off with 3 days per week. And then that is it, just walk. And I was like, what is walking gonna do? Because you like we're pretty hardcore people. I think most of us in medicine. And if you're an
Right.
athlete, you're like, I
Right.
gotta work hard. I can't just do something very like minimal. Yes, 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 yes,
That's why I practice yoga.
yes. It's like calm, relax.
It's like, woosah.
Yeah, yeah. So just by walking, especially if you're doing it fasted, what happens is you haven't eaten all night, so there's not a lot of food in your body. So by the
Mhm.
time you wake up, your body doesn't have much to burn. Around the 40-minute mark, your body will switch to fat burning. So the first maybe 40 minutes is going to be burning the sugar that's left over in your liver and in your muscles. Thereafter, it switches to burning fat. So that's where the magic comes in. And even just like 3 days per week is going to make a big difference. So I noticed, I was like, I used to be an athlete. I was not this toned. Like actually, when I finished this program, I had a six pack, and I'm like, as an athlete, I never had a six pack. I did a million crunches. I did all this crazy stuff,
Mhm.
but just by reducing the amount of stress and inflammation in my body, and being targeted in selecting exercises where I'm losing fat, it made a big difference. So for anyone, I think most of us can try to squeeze in an hour, 3 days a week, just for a start, to just walk.
Yeah, I love that. And you said something really key is the stress, reducing stress and inflammation. And when we think about stress, like for those of you all who don't know this, stress releases cortisol. And cortisol is the antithesis of what you want in your body if you're trying to bring your weight down, right? That those high cortisols from chronic stress, which happens in burnout, it brings the destabilizes the blood sugar and causes us to store fat. I mean, basically is preparing us to survive, right? So you hold fat, you release sugar, it's just you don't sleep as well, like all of those things. So it makes you be more awake. So it's just all of those things preparing us to survive. And so when you reduce that stress, and I love the fasted exercise, and it just made something click for me in my own life because I get up in the morning and I do yoga, but I do more of a similar to a power yoga. I practice Ashtanga yoga. And so, but I do it before I eat. So, like, I practice an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, 4 days a week. And so and when you said you got toned, I was like, oh, that's why I got some shoulders and I got some back muscles now. And that's how I
Wow.
maintain my weight is by observing the swim and grow that way rule, and by exercising fasted. Now, one of the things that I started doing, because I'll show for those watching the video, I have a counter, a Fitbit on my arm, and I noticed that because I work from home, I don't get as many steps in. So one of the things that I started doing, I can walk in the neighborhood, and sometimes I don't have that much time. So what I would do is several times a day walk up and down my little stairs. Like if I'm going down to get some water, I walk up and down a few times and then I go get my water. And then I walk back up and I walk up and down a couple times. Then I come back to my desk. And so that has actually really helped me to get more steps in to do that. So even like simple things like that. Also, sometimes I'll break it up, maybe break that hour up into 2 30 minutes or 4 15 minutes, depending on how my schedule goes or how my day is. So for those people who are sitting at a desk and like, well, I don't have time to get up and do a lot. I mean, I can't even take my hour lunch. How am I going to get in that? I have to get my kids to school at 7 a.m. All of the excuses we talk about. You're in your office, get up and walk in place for 30 minutes in the morning before you eat. Take your breakfast to work with you and walk in place for 30 minutes and then eat your breakfast. There's your fasted walk. So I think part of it is being creative too.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And there's another type of workout, though it depends on what your goals are. It's called HIT, high interval intensity
Yes.
training. Sorry, high interval intensity training.
Yes.
So these are good workouts if you're trying to build and maintain muscle. You just have
Mhm.
to be conscious of how often you do them. You don't want to do them more than 2 times per week because they really essentially increase your inflammation. You're increasing
Mhm.
cortisol, you're increasing your growth hormone,
Mhm.
and it can make you more hungry. But
Mhm.
if you're mixing it up, say with your walk,
Mhm.
you're conscious on the day you're doing your HIT, you're going to be more hungry. You're not going to pick cookies. You're maybe going to pick extra serving of vegetables, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can do a great HIT workout in 15 minutes. And you want it to be so intense that you can't go more than 10 to 15 minutes. That's when you
Mhm.
know you're doing a really good HIT workout. And for those of you who don't know what HIT workouts are, you can probably go on YouTube, type in HIT workouts, and try to select something that's not more than 10 to 15 minutes. By the time you go 30 minutes and more, it's not HIT anymore. It's more like the pure kind of cardio,
Yeah.
and or you might hurt yourself.
And so also select for the level that you're at, because they can have very advanced hit workouts. And if they don't have modifications, you definitely can hurt yourself. But yeah, I forgot about the hit workouts, and YouTube has tons of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Calisthenics, I think, is really good as well. Using your own body weight. I've started to do a little bit of calisthenics in between my yoga workouts, mostly for mobility. I think calisthenics is really good for mobility. You're an exercise physiologist. I'm not, that's your domain. What do you think about, what is your take on calisthenics?
Yeah, no, I'm always willing to learn. And I think as I mentioned, the journey with my nutrition coach was very humbling because it's like as I mentioned, I knew these things, but
Mhm.
I didn't know them in the way to apply them. So I agree, calisthenics are great. I think the main thing is to figure out as a person what your goals are and
Yes.
be willing to get help because getting help will really expedite the process. As I
Mhm.
mentioned, for me, when I became an attending, I gained, I don't know how many extra pounds, like 30, I think yeah, 30, 40 pounds, and
Mhm.
managed to lose all of it by getting help from somebody who has the practical aspects of, what we so-called know, and also the biggest thing was keeping me accountable.
Ooh, that's the thing. That is the thing. Being
Yeah.
accountable because it's easy. There are some people who are really, they say they're going to do something, they do it. But like when the times get tough, we default to old habits. I love sugar. I'm just gonna put it out there. Dessert. That's not candy. It's not candy bars and stuff like it's cake and cobbler and pie. It's like the real I'm from the South, okay? And we had dessert, but I only eat dessert once a week. So I look forward to now as I'm recording this podcast, I'm chuckling, I say that, but this coming up is my son's fall break and his 10th birthday. So I already know I'm going to eat dessert more than once a week. But generally speaking, you know, and so I love what you're saying. Like, having that accountability. I have someone in my life that like after, we say, okay, all right, this is coming up. I know I'm gonna go off the rails. So I'm just gonna call it. I'm gonna do as the best I can. I'm not gonna beat myself up about it. But come X date, we tighten it up, tight, tight, tight. And then I'm held accountable to that by my accountability partner. So I love that you said that.
100%. I have a sweet tooth too, and I lived in Florida for a while. So yes, the Southerners, you guys do food on a different level. I agree. I agree. I agree. And I think also giving yourself permission. I love how you say that I'm gonna eat this on this day, and you look forward to it, and no guilt. And you're like, I'm keeping my promise to myself. I get to eat my whatever you want. For me, it's
Mhm,
brownies, anything
mhm,
chocolate, or like your peach cobbler pie. Eat it and enjoy it fully, and you'll know that time is coming around. Like you haven't
mhm.
planned again next week, you don't need to be so upset if you can't have it
Right.
on Tuesday. Your day Saturday,
That's right.
yeah,
And Saturday is cake day.
it's okay. It's totally okay. I love how you're saying that. So going back to what I was saying about like coach and accountability, I think people need to figure out what their goals are. Number one, are you trying to build muscle? Are you trying to lose weight? Like whatever your goal is, I think it's not a bad idea to get help and or to do research, because
Mhm.
whatever you're eating will be a little bit different depending on your goals. And same thing, whatever kind of exercise you're doing will be a little bit different depending on your goals. If your goal is to gain muscle, you will probably end up eating a little bit more carbohydrates, more fat, and the workouts you do will be more causing more inflammation, but
Mhm.
inflammation in a good way to help you build
Yes,
the muscle, to help you put on the weight.
that's
If you're
right.
trying to lose weight, you will be careful with the carbs, not completely eliminating carbs, but careful with your carb
Mhm,
portions, your fat portions in general, and you're
mhm,
going to try to select exercises that minimize inflammation and
mhm,
reduce stress and are
mhm.
not going to trigger your hunger hormones to be more active. So I think that's a very important delineation to make, and that's a delineation or a piece of the puzzle I did not have for myself. I was
Yeah.
selecting workouts. Imagine, I was doing 1 hour almost hit workouts before my 12-hour night shift. I'd arrived at the 12-hour night shift and I'm like, I'm hungry. I made it, I did my workout, so I'm ordering everything Starbucks, Red Lobster before everything closes. And
Red Lobster,
eating all night
girl.
long.
I remember that. I might to love me some Red Lobster. I could
And
even walk in
eating,
there.
yes, and eating all night long. And then,
Mhm,
like, with a messed up circadian rhythm, like, it was a recipe for disaster.
mhm.
But, anyways, it was a good lesson that I learned. And
Yeah.
it really showed me the importance of knowing your goals, getting accountability, getting help, and just how small changes can make such a big difference.
That's right. Well, speaking of circadian rhythms, let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about sleep because this is the thing. And I am a woman of a certain phase of life called menopause. Oh, so this is especially for us women leaders, women physicians who are moving into this next phase of life. This how important sleep is and how important sleep hygiene is. I had a shout out to Dr. Funke. We had a conversation several episodes ago about sleep in regards to children, but I think it's important to manage it ourselves as well.
100%. Sleep is so essential. And for those of us who are in medicine, we learn, but we have like, most of us are, I don't know how this next generation is, but we're like team no sleep. It's like we all took pride. Yeah, as a physician, we all took pride in being like, well, I work like 36-hour shifts. And then my tenants would be like, well, in my days, it was 48-hour shifts, almost like poo-pooing
Like,
on us that you guys have no work ethic. You only work 30.
right.
So once you know your body, there is, how do I put it, a place for that. I think I don't necessarily, neither condone, but also look down on those kind of shifts, because there are certain things you learn when you're working at night, and there
Mhm.
are certain depths in terms of building strength and resilience that you build when you do those kind of shifts. Is that when you know you can work 36-hour shifts, maybe you're not your best at the end of the shift, then you're like, in the rest of your life, you're like, I want to get XYZZ done. So I've done it before. So I'm going to go to work, going to travel, going to do this, going to do that, run on 2 hours of sleep and keep going. We take that into our lives after training, even though we don't necessarily need to. And
Mhm.
sleep is so essential. Not only does it help us consolidate our memories as physicians or even as leaders, people who are leading other people, we need to
Mhm.
make good decisions. We need to have our thoughts organized. We need to remember certain things at a certain time. Not only does it impact the way we think, it also impacts our body in terms of
Mhm.
even the way our body looks and the way our body functions. So going back to my case, where I was doing the night shifts, I was still trying to sleep enough, but there is this, I think, is a sleep shift worker disorder that they're coming up
Mm.
with. They're finding people who do shift work and switch their circadian rhythm back and forth, have
Mm.
higher risk of developing diabetes, heart disease, depression. The list goes on and on. So there are ways to mitigate it by ensuring, even if you're doing the shift job, whenever you're able to sleep, try and get the full 8 hours of sleep. Even give
Mhm.
yourself, pamper yourself a little bit, sleep 9 hours. On the
Yeah.
weekends when you're switching back, sleep a little bit more. If you're able to get out of doing night shifts and switch to a day job, it's much better for your health in the long run. The specifics about sleep. So, lack of sleep, as we talked about, increases your cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone, it's a salt. So, when your cortisol levels are high, not that cortisol is purely evil. There's a place for cortisol,
Place, right.
in the morning. But if
Mhm.
your cortisol levels remain elevated at night, your blood pressure will be a little bit higher. Sometimes it contributes to high blood pressure for some people. It makes you retain water, so you will
Mhm.
notice that you're gaining weight, especially around the middle. Lack of sleep also increases insulin resistance. So you might be eating high carbohydrate foods and you end up being in the pre-diabetes range, even
Mhm.
though you're not necessarily eating more food or eating more of the foods you should not be eating. Not lack of sleep also increases your ghrelin hormone. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone. So they found
Mm.
people who don't have enough sleep or sleep less, on the days that they sleep less, they actually eat more and make poorer food choices. It's just, how do I put it? Hormonal. It's not like you can control it. It's just that's the
Yeah.
way your brain is going to be because it's, I need more energy. So it's 2 a.m. I'm going to eat ice cream. I'm sure everyone can relate. Those nights that you stayed
Yes.
up late, those night shifts, you're like, we all want chips. We're all going to order pizza. And
Mhm.
even if that you're not that type of person who eats that way, your resistance or your self-discipline is very low. And then
Mhm.
the other thing, lack of sleep reduces your leptin levels. Leptin is the satiety or feeling full hormone. So you can see from a million different angles, lack of sleep is really not good for us.
It's so interesting. One of the things that so I my cousin's is a she's a nurse practitioner, but she used to do a lot of work inside with diabetes in the community up in New York. She's in New York. And so she got into integrative medicine. And so we were having this conversation because she implements this in her own life as well. And she was saying, we were talking about, she's one of my accountability partners when it comes to food. And so she was like, oftentimes when we feel hungry, we need to ask ourselves first, are we tired? Because sometimes we need to like, or are we stressed? Are we tired? And so I started asking myself that question, especially later at night, because I eat pretty well and I do intermittent fast. So my last meal is typically around 6:30. My first meal is typically around 9:30 in the morning. But generally, I'm not hungry after that. Like after 6:30, I'm just not hungry. And so what I notice is that there are certain times where I find myself like hungry at 8 p.m. And I'm like, well, I just ate, like I shouldn't be hungry. And so if that happens over time, I've learned to ask myself, how's your sleep and
Mm.
how's your stress? And so you just when you said that, it just brought that forward. Yeah, like one of the things we can do, especially if we're not in those high acuity, if we have extricated ourselves from those high acuity environments as leaders, if we've shifted, sometimes our body takes some time to catch up. And so we're our when we and also our body remembers well. Our body remembers well. So even if you've come out of those environments and you're like, well, like I work from home, or I have my own business and I don't have that kind of stress all the time. There's always going to be times of stress. If you're grieving, I just had a podcast episode I recorded on grief. If you're grieving, if you're emotionally stressed, if there's some financial strain that might be going on, if there's something going on with the kids, if there's something going on in the relationship, and you find yourself craving, ask yourself the question, Are you stressed? Are
Mm.
you rested? So I love that you broke down the hormones. I love, as you got me over here geeking out. You broke down the hormones. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves that question. We're craving when we know we're not supposed to be craving. Instead of allowing ourselves to give in to that particular vice, we can take the actions that we need to take in order to remedy the root cause of it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. 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 You know what? I so appreciate this conversation and the gems that you have dropped, the gold. I want to ask one more question, and then I want you to tell people where they can find you. So, how do you help your patients? Like, how do you help your patients with these things in your practice?
That is a great question. I think depending on what my patient is coming to see me, for example, diabetes is a common condition that we treat as internists, family medicine doctors. Even if you're not in that specialty, you're going to, as a physician, you're going to bump into a patient that has diabetes. So I'm shocked, and I should not be shocked anymore, when I start talking to my patients about, say, their targets, their A1C. I'll be like, "Oh, so have you ever talked to a dietitian? Do you know which foods you need to avoid to make your sugars better?" A lot of people are
Mhm.
like, "No." And when I ask them to tell me about what they're eating, it's, "Oh, this is why it's working."
Yeah, right.
And the power of just the simple things is so incredible. I'll tell you a story about one patient who really impressed me. I think is also a testament to his will. So when I talk to patients, then they tell me, "Oh yeah, I eat this and this and this." I'll try to give them some general guidance, but I also try to make arrangements for them to talk to nutritionists who go through
Mhm.
their diet step by step and really give them very specific guidance. And a lot of the dietitians that we work with are very good because the city I live in, well, like most cities in North America, there's people from all different kinds of countries. They have different diets depending on where they're from. So it's like we want to be realistic. They're not
Yeah,
going to change their diets completely, stop eating their
right.
ethnic food if that's what their whole family eats. But it's just giving them guidance to, say, if they're from India, maybe we can make whole wheat chapati, eat half
Mhm.
chapati, and take
Yeah.
more vegetables. And if you eat meat, add a little bit more meat, and then cut back on the butter and the sauce. Those kind of modifications that are very practical. So definitely, I start with making sure that they know what they're supposed to be eating. I think that's a big thing, even with high blood pressure, even with heart failure. I have so many patients who have heart failure who don't know that they're not supposed to be drinking 4 liters or 90 some ounces of fluid. And you're like, "Oh, nobody told you you're supposed to restrict your food and not take more salt? This is why you keep having these problems." So this is so foundational, but I think with
Wow.
the system that we're in, most of us don't have time to do that. But when you give patients those guidelines and they follow them, it's incredible. So going back to the story, I had this patient who has diabetes. His A1C
Mhm.
was incredible. I think it was like 11 or 12, quite high. So I talked to him about the diet and exercise piece. He came back 3 months later, and this is before the dietitian was able to get to him. His A1C was down to 6. I was seeing things. This usually doesn't happen with medications, even after
Mhm.
3 years for most of my patients.
Right.
When I talked to him, he said, "Yeah, I took it seriously." And he's like very like stoic, and like I
Yeah.
was just like clapping, and he's like, "Whatever." And I'm like, "Do you understand? This does not happen.
Right.
Like you see this once in a lifetime, even with, and usually it takes so many medications to get here. We just started
Right.
him on one medication, and just the tweak to his life was powerful, powerful."
I think that when I was in clinical practice, patients used to be so surprised at the magnitude of change that can happen with simple adjustments to food, exercise, sleep, like just lifestyle. And those tweaks, when you can work them into your life, when you can make them habits, they make such a huge difference. And so I love and giving them the guidelines, like really giving them some specific like tips and tools of how to do things. Like some people are like, well, I don't know how to do that. Like, how do I? And I think it's great that you do that. You give them those guidelines and those tips and those tools to be able to take on their own, take accountability, take responsibility and be empowered in their own health and well-being. That's brilliant. That's really good. You're a kinfolk because that's the work that I used to do when I was practicing integrative medicine. I used to love to give those guidelines and give those tips and tricks and help people change their lifestyle. That was a lot of the work that I did. So I really that's why I was excited about this conversation because I know you speaking my language. So well, I really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation. I think you're doing so much good work, especially, having people be empowered in their well-being. And really focusing on the foundations, like the foundations. And I think this is access. This is stuff that not only we as physicians can incorporate with our patients, but like in our own lives and leaders in our own lives. How can we take care of the basics such that we have the energy to think and lead the way we want to lead and show up the way we want to show up, right? In the face of all of the other systemic things that are going on, we have to always take it back to the basics, take it back to the foundations. I think that's very important. So thank you so much, Dr. Lwanga, for coming on. Where can people follow you and how can they reach out to you if they want to work with you?
Okay, so on social media, for those of you who are on LinkedIn, you can just type in Anita Lwanga and I'm there. On Instagram, I'm at Lwanga MD, all lowercase. On TikTok, at Dr. Lwanga, all lowercase, and on YouTube as Dr. Lwanga. I tend to share a lot of different tips on YouTube. I actually have playlists about different medical conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, and so forth. Even tips if you end up in the hospital, what to do or what to bring with you so you're not bored. I made a video about that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, please feel free to follow me, share the videos with your friends, or if you have ideas for things you'd like to hear about, you're a patient and you have questions, feel free to message us and we will make a video just for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will have all of that in the show notes, you all. Thank you so much for being on here with me. It was just a pleasure to have the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and also to talk to your audience.
Yes. All right. Well, you heard it. Go check out Dr. Luanga. We'll have all of her information in the show notes. This information is really foundational information. She'll share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it with a family member. This information needs to get out so that people can really be empowered in their own health and well-being. And leave a comment, leave a review, whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. Leave a comment or a review so the people coming after you know that this is valuable information. Yes. So I always like to thank the audience because without the audience, there is no podcast. Of course, if you all want to anything around communication, deep work, psychological safety, you know where to find me, mindremappingacademy.com. And until the next time we see you all, stay empowered.